Beth Hoffman is a farmer, and she wrote a book, and she writes a regular column, and she and her husband host farm to table huge themed meals in a refurbished barn on the farm, and they also run an Airbnb. It's a lot, but she is out to prove that farming can be done this way. Hi, I'm Dave Price, and this is the American Farmland Owner Podcast. Farmers, operators, and investors, they all have different ideas on what and how things should happen on the farm. Beth Hoffman relies on skills that she learned as an agricultural journalist to find ways to make her farm sustainable, not just environmentally, but also financially. And she took a different route to get here. Let's start with how you got where you are on your farm in small town Iowa. How the heck did that happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
It's a long journey.
A long journey. I met my husband kind of he wasn't my husband at the time, obviously, but I met John kind of the moment I moved to Berkeley to go to grad school at the School of Journalism. And he had told me that he had just been in Iowa with his kids, and when his kids were grown, he was going back there to take over the farm. And as I like to tell the story, it's probably I could not have accurately told you where Iowa was on the map at the time. I mean, yeah. So I didn't think much of it, but obviously then we dated, we got married, the kids grew. I was a journalist covering food and agriculture for 25 years, probably by the time we moved here. He had been a farm kid, grew up here on this land. He then moved to San Francisco to go to culinary school, and then became a chef, became a wine buyer. Then he was a butcher for the last 12 years that we were in San Francisco. So we thought we had like enormous food knowledge between us. I had been all over the world. Well, not all over, but I had been to India and Italy and Africa reporting on food. And so, we really thought that we had a good idea about what we wanted to do and how it would be done. What we didn't know anything about was the economics of farming, which is what I ended up writing the book about, because there were so many moments where I was just like, I call it those dog years where your dog kind of perks up like, what? And that's how I felt like with so many different things we were going through that I didn't know. And I thought, if I don't know, most likely, even farmers don't know, but the general public certainly does not know.
Uh, I don't mean this to be a smart aleck, but one of the challenges, as you know, in journalism is you're covering a topic and you have to try to become an expert as much as you can, right? And I'm curious, and you still are a journalist, but when you took on this additional role as a family farmer,
Mm.
how much did you find out that you did not know?
Um, yeah, enormous amounts in certain areas. Like, I had known a lot about the ecology of things and the environmental aspects, and John had been in the Bay Area through a time period when local food and organics and all of that became a thing. Like, he moved there in the 90s. So we knew a lot about that world, and we knew that there was a lot of potential. But, as a journalist, and I think this is still something that the media struggles with, is that we kind of phrase things in agriculture as like, this thing is happening this year. Like, right now, there's a drought. This year, it's really hot in these areas. There's a trade war going on this year. And so the phrasing makes it look like there's a difficulty that's a short-term thing that's happening. It's a blip.
And then it's over with.
Everything else is like typically normal. There's a norm. And in agriculture, that's just not the case. Like it's more prevalent that there are issues and problems and ongoing financial struggles year after year after year after year, even in the good years. So it's that I didn't know anything about. I didn't understand at all when I was reporting on it.
Okay, so let's talk about the book. It's called Bet the Farm: The Dollars and Cents of Growing Food in America. You sat down to write this. Why?
It's a good question because there's a lot of books out there about food and about farming.
Hmm.
And I really felt that after, let me take a step back. One of the things that John had me do early on, because I was a radio reporter, so I had all this recording equipment. And early on, he had me come and record his parents and their life story. And that kind of sparked me this interest in me, like, well, I want to understand this from these farmers around here. So I talked to kind of the old timers about how things had gone and how they had experienced the industry. And it just really made me understand that I wanted to write a book that was empathetic to farmers because I felt like I had never read that book that was told on a perspective of, yes, someone who's doing something different, but is also empathetic to the reasons why people would grow corn or why you would grow, yeah, corn and beans and commodity cattle or even have a hog house. I don't want to have those things, but I think it's really important that even if we want to change those things, we have to understand how we got here. Like, why do people do this? So that was really one of my key reasons for writing the book is that I wanted to present that case and show that farmers were not just kind of minions of big business or brainwashed or uneducated. They were making economic decisions for their families that they thought were the best. And the ways that we got here, the history of that is kind of fascinating.
So, from what you've experienced, when did you start your farm? What year?
We moved out in 2018.
2018. All right, so
Right.
you're about 6 years in,
Yeah.
essentially. Now you've got some other stuff going on too that we want to get into. But so is it financially sustainable in this day and age?
We are financially sustainable. I mean, it's not something where you can then, have profits to go on vacation or buy a car, but the farm can take care of itself. The land can take care of itself and be its own entity. Yes, that's a viable thing.
And I'm not trying to get into to your personal lives here, but the one thing that about you is that you seem similar to a lot of people I'm meeting now, that you are positioning yourself so you have all kinds of stuff happening at the same time. Which, first of all, the organization's bonkers about how you try to make that all work. But um, you all, I mean, you're not just growing stuff on the farm. You have agritourism, you have all kinds of stuff. Can you kind of checklist us here with everything that you've got going on?
Just a list of not the how to, but the
Not the how to, just what first.
so we raise grass finished fed the pasture raised animals, beef and goats. They're here their whole lives. So that means that there's two herds of each of those on the farm. We raise our own hay then because they have to eat that over the winter. Um we have a very large garden and we sell some of that produce to customers and to restaurants. And we now have a remodeled old barn where we have classes and we have overnight stays, Airbnb. I
Okay,
think
this
that
doesn't seem doable for two people.
well, yeah, and then then there's off-farm income, which is a
Hmm.
huge part of farms. So that includes my writing on my Substack, my kind of consulting work that I do with a lot of different food groups. So yeah, it's not really possible for two people. We have another person who's here pretty much, I'd say kind of 3/4 time at this point. He's working with us. We like that really, and a lot of this is in the book. One of our real concepts is that we don't really want to just hire people and have them work for us. We want people who are working with us, because if this is a regenerative farm, if this is a sustainable, self-sufficient farm, then that should be the case with or without us here and alive and running it. We want this to be regenerating not only the land but the community, the rural area, making economic opportunity and making opportunity for young farmers. So Jacob is his name. He's here and he works with John on with the cattle and with the goats, but then he also wants to do small grains. He's been planting oats. He bought a baler. So we're trying, the plan is like also help him and people like him to get going. We also have someone who works with me in the garden. He's also a value chain coordinator. We have a few of them in the state of Iowa who help connect the dots between farms and buyers. And so he does some of that for us. He helps us with that. Yeah, so I mean, we need, oh, and I just hired someone to help with social media. This woman who's just a whiz at, like, making the graphics and things. It's like that's a time consuming element. So to get back to that, like, empathy of why would you grow corn and beans? Well, one of the major reasons why is because it's easy. It's much easier than what we're doing, not just in like the physical labor component of it, but it's the whole system set up that you can just, you just go and you can buy the seeds very easily and you can get the sprays for it very easily and someone to do that work very easily, and you harvest it and you drop it off at the elevator. It's not, you don't need to do a lot of thinking about where it's going to go and how's it going to work. And but if you're doing anything different in Iowa, that requires all of those other components: social media, direct marketing, websites, you know, having relationships with every customer that we have. So yeah, that's where it does. It's been it has been overwhelming and stressful. And that again is something that I talk about in the book. We have these mythologies of getting back to the land and the simple life, which is kind of a funny irony that there's really nothing simple about it if you're actually going to be making a living on the farm or having the farm sustain itself.
And so you mentioned your Substack. It's called In the Dirt, and a recent post was that specifically about Iowa grows a lot of corn and beans, but instead of focusing on the most, focus on the best. And that's kind of what you're practicing on the farm since you're not doing those commodities. And as we know, it's a tough life for corn farmers right now because they don't make a heck of a lot of money and they're growing a lot of that stuff and still the numbers don't add up right. So, how would you recommend kind of for broadening beyond corn and beans? Because no offense, but the way you tell the story, this doesn't sound very glamorous what you're doing. This is kind of passion driven, and you work yourself silly, and you figured out all kinds of these different streams to make a go of it, and you have to connect with other equally passionate people. That doesn't sound easy.
This is true. You have a good point there. Um, yeah, I think in all we've seen from, if you look at a place like California, and once upon a time, this the whole thing started as well, where there was became local food was the focus, and getting those foods into grocery stores, and having restaurants have this real passion about it too, and kind of working to connect those dots between all the different elements of this, food system. I'm putting it in quotes because it's this big, massive, ambiguous thing about what is the food system. It takes a lot of different components to create actual change. Um, I think that we are amongst a lot of other pioneers in the state. Some of them have been doing this actually for 30, 40, 50 years. People like Denise O'Brien, um they really kind of paved the way, and there are now some organizations at least that really are there to support us and to bring us together and to help us kind of figure out those components. So groups like the Practical Farmers of Iowa, and I'm a board member at the Iowa Farmers Union. They're groups that are hopefully helping on an organizational level move things forward. So yes, if everyone was to be on their individual farm doing their own passion thing and, like, just working really hard, we're not gonna make a whole lot of change. But now that there are groups in place, and a really exciting thing is that there's now another group to organize the groups called the Iowa Food Systems Coalition, which I'm a part of in the communications. Um, we've just come together, and that was like 40 organizations, something like 600 individuals weighed in on this. And there's like an actual plan. There's like a manifesto of how do we move forward and how do we make change together, so that all of the different organizations can see themselves in reflection to each other, know what we're doing, have similar goals working together. And what I hope is, like, even within that, groups get together and align. Well, there's policy requests that come along with the coalition, but that we also work on communications together, and we are putting out the same messaging, and we are making a difference in numbers. So that's a lot of different. Maybe we can put all of those names in your notes here for people to find those groups. But um it's really that no longer are we each individual group working on our own farm doing our own thing. That's not going to really create a lot of lasting change, and we'll all be exhausted all the time and probably burn out. That's not really gonna work. So it's got to be at multiple different levels. It has to be at the farm level. There have to be people doing these practices for other farmers to see and to learn from, and pick and choose what they're going to do. Um and then there has to be levels of, markets, where markets are changed, and transportation, and all these boring parts of the food system that have to come together.
Can you talk to back you up a sec? You were talking about how you all sell some of your produce locally to restaurants, and you're just outside Lavilia, right?
Yes, we are. So that's an hour from Des Moines.
Okay, and so your community is roughly how many people?
I think 500-ish, but
Okay,
that seems like a stretch.
so I glean from what you're talking about. I think it's important for you, if I'm following you, you want to be sustainable. You want to make it work what you and John are doing on the farm, but you want to kind of build out too. So you want that kind of community support as well. How are you involved in that? Because I would assume, I mean, sure, you want people to buy your produce so you can pay the bills, but I mean, that's also part of kind of spreading what you're trying to do to the region, right?
Yeah, that it's again, that's an interesting point, because what it feels like now is that I don't know if this maybe you could weigh in too, because for me, like, COVID really cemented the idea in my brain that my community does not have to be, I don't have to be face to face. I don't even have to be within a 5 minutes drive of that person. So the community that's built here through these different groups, through the coalition, through the Practical Farmers of Iowa, through the Farmers Union, is like statewide. And for us selling our products, this becomes, I like to say that, it takes a city to have a farm. It's kind of like that child takes a village to raise a
Hmm.
child. Well, we need a city really to upkeep a farm, and or lots of small towns. So we need customers that are within, that hour and a half distance that we can get products to. I think it's an important distinction that when we're doing livestock and meat, though, the purchases are much larger. Like, I'm not trying to sell only, a a thing of kale, for
Hmm.
50 cents profit. We're selling, a 1,200 pound cow. So that is a little bit different. And people, luckily in Iowa, are used to buying quarter or half beef, having it in the freezer. That's an easier medium than I see, like my friends growing flowers, for example. Just amazing for the environment, brings in all these pollinators and creates these beautiful areas and nearby cities and towns. But that the margins are so small that that's a really hard business. And you've got to, I mean, in all cases, you got to keep drumming up business and interesting people and, exciting them with your idea. But again, our hope is that the community sees the farm as their farm. That people come and they take a class or they come to a dinner, but they also connect with John and I and see this farm as like their oasis where they can come to, and they feel good about where their beef is coming from, or their goat.
Hearing you tell this story reminded me growing up. I grew up in Southern Illinois, and we had four kids in the family, not very much money. And so I remember when mom and dad got their tax refund, they would go to a local butcher. And again, we had four kids, so we ate a ton. And mom usually made meat every night. And so they'd bring home, we would split a side of beef with another family. And I remember it was like this big production line in the kitchen. So we had that white paper spread out all over the kitchen table, and mom would separate it all based on, there were six of us, so it's going to take a lot of hamburger here and a lot of round steak here, whatever. And then there was that black marker where she would write what it was on there, how much was in the package, and the date. And then we had a deep freeze in which was in our laundry room, and that's what we'd use for however many months. And that is a visual that, of course, as kids, we complained because we had to help, because that's what we did do, was complain anytime mom made us help with stuff. But I mean, it's definitely an image you don't forget, though.
Yeah, and I think people, like I said, I think here, in San Francisco, people don't buy a quarter beef. That's
Sure.
not really a thing, because you have access to good beef all the time. But it is more cost effective, even for beef like ours. Like, it ends up being, let's say, at most, like, somewhere around $9 a pound for the beef that you buy from us. Well, that may be high for really low quality ground beef, for example, right? But this is like kind of the best quality that you can buy. And you're also, then your fillets are $9 a pound.
Hmm.
Your ribeyes are $9 a pound. So it does make sense economically for a lot of people. I do wish, like, even at places like that maybe like churches would go in together and then divide out, I feels like there's a lot of opportunity for bigger communities to purchase like a whole beef and divide up amongst themselves. But you also make a good point about having beef every day. I mean, we raise beef and we discourage people from eating beef every day. I
Yeah,
mean,
and we didn't have it
yeah.
every day.
Yeah, but I mean, it's something that we've learned a lot more about now, that like it's not sustainable for the planet that we all eat beef every day. I mean, that's an argument like, oh, well, we couldn't have that much grass finished beef because, it wouldn't meet the supply, it wouldn't meet the demand. Well, then maybe we shouldn't be eating that much if what we have to do is then force animals into confinement in really unhealthy situations, so on and so forth.
So where do you see this going?
The farm?
Exactly. Like you talk
I
about this, like this sounds more like a legacy thing. Long after you're gone, you want this thing still cranking.
Yes. So what do I see? I mean, I see us being much more established, um, and like filling classes quickly. We've been filling, like, the dinners kind of have been selling out pretty quickly. So I mean, I think that kind of clientele and the buzz about the farm, I hope, is very much within our lifetimes and our working lives here. But yeah, we hope to have a bunch of other people, and have this land kind of in a trust where perhaps our kids own it, but that they then are not looking for who's going to pay the most rent and, just the quickest, easiest way. It will already be an established situation where the farm can then continue on without us. Yeah. So we're hopeful that there will be a lot of other people involved, doing their own things. Because there's plenty of land when you're not row cropping. Suddenly you could do the same thing on the same land. When you could have true diversity where you could have chickens that come after the cows and bees, and you could have, a multitude of things, forage products and mushrooms. We love to mushroom hunt. I forgot to add that one.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the conversation. Thank you for helping us explore this.
Thanks for having me on this. It's really a treat.
She is Beth Hoffman, running Whippoorwill Creek Farm in Monroe County, Iowa. You can learn more about Beth's time before she got to the farm by reading our profile piece about her in the American Farmland Owner Weekly newsletter. You can find that. You can also sign up so it comes right to your email inbox every week. It's free, by the way. You can do that at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Thanks for your support. Thanks for listening. And thanks for caring about the future of our farmland.